Good day, ladies and gentlemen. So today our topic is the emergency power of the Congress. So my partner and I, my name is Chara May Rosan Lagunday, and Miss Chara May Pulido, she's my partner. We are assigned with this topic so we could discuss further and we could dig deeper what are this power and how is it going to be applied to our nation. President Duterte asked Congress for many powers to deal with the coronavirus disease, but a lawyer warned this should not affect human rights. The Philippines may now experience what it's like to live under the rule of a president who wields sweeping emergency powers to an extent never seen in the post-Marcos era. The only time such powers were granted in recent history was during the aftermath of the 9-long-day coup d'etat attempt in December 1989. In which the reform, the armed forces movement and soldiers loyal to the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos almost toppled the government of then-President Corazon Aquino. Our president asked for some of the powers that were granted to Aquino, but unique to Duterte's request for the controversial provisions, empowering him to realign any appropriations from all branches of the government, allocate the assets of any government, corporations or agency, and cancel projects to divert their budgets for whatever purpose the President may deem necessary and desirable.
Malacanang is asking Congress to declare a national emergency and grant special powers to President Duterte to address the novel coronavirus. Now, among these powers are the power to temporarily take over or direct the operation of any privately owned public utility or business affected with public interest, including but not limited to hotels, public transportation, and telecommunications entities. Hotels will be used to house health workers or serve as quarantine centers or medical relief and aid distribution centers, while public transportation will ferry health, emergency, and frontline personnel. Takeover of telecommunication entities is intended to facilitate uninterrupted communication channels between the government and the public. Management of these businesses will remain with the owners, but the president or his representative will direct and supervise their operations, providing for a reasonable compensation for additional damage or costs incurred.
No law shall be passed authorizing any transfer of appropriations. However, the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Justice or Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and the heads of constitutional commissions may by law be authorized to augment any item in the General Appropriations Law. This is for the respective offices from savings in other items of the respective appropriations. The constitutionality of such powers may likewise be questioned. Even before the bill was passed, the concerned lawyers for civil liberties said granting Duterte such unbridled power over the budget would violate Article 6, Section 25 of the 1987 Constitution. The Constitution does not expressly grant the President additional war powers or other powers in times of national emergency. However, many scholars think that the framers implied these powers because the structural design of the executive branch enables it to act faster than the legislative branch. Nevertheless, because the Constitution remains silent on the issue, the judiciary cannot grant these powers to the executive branch when it tries to wield them. The courts will only recognize the right of the executive branch to use emergency powers if Congress has granted such powers to the President. University of the Philippines and Ateneo de Manila University law professor Antonio Lavinia said Duterte's request for emergency powers invoked three special powers provided by the 1987 Constitution. Article 6, Section 23 provides in times of war or other national emergency, the Congress may by law authorize the President for a limited period and subject to such restriction as it may prescribe to exercise powers necessary and proper to carry out a declared national policy. Duterte may invoke the COVID-19 pandemic to gain the emergency powers because the Constitution does not specifically say what constitutes a national emergency. The Constitution is very general. I think that this provision subject to safeguards might be necessary. From what we see, is akin to war right, now na wala kang kalaban, As an aside, it may be noted that the Department of the Interior and Local Government, Undersecretary Martin Dinos, said on Saturday, ang karapatang pantao ay nawawala pagdating ng state of emergency. Our human rights are gone during a state of emergency.
The same bill will also empower the president to purchase goods like testing kits, lease properties, and construct temporary medical facilities without going through the rules on procurement, as well as require businesses to prioritize and accept contracts for materials and services in connection with the fight against COVID-19. The bill also has provisions to regulate public and private transportation and traffic, as well as the distribution and use of power, fuel, energy, and water to ensure adequate supply. If the bill is enacted, the president can cancel appropriated programs, projects, or activities to generate savings and to reallocate unused and unspent funds or funds allocated for discontinued projects to measures to address the COVID-19 emergency. The proposed bill goes as far as repealing laws setting aside funds for specific or special projects which have remained unused so that the savings may be reallocated. Another provision gives the president the power to realign any appropriation in the 2020 General Appropriations Act in order to fund measures to meet the emergency. The bill also seeks to punish any violation of the laws or the rules, regulations, and directives of the national government with 2 months jail time and a fine between 10,000 to 1 million pesos. In a text message to ABS-CBN News, Soto confirmed receipt of the draft bill, although he clarified that nothing is final beyond the title of the bill. He earlier told Senate reporters that key Duterte cabinet officials and legislative leaders during a meeting Saturday agreed to pass a bill that will give the president the financial authority to realign funds available to address the COVID emergency crisis. The Senate will hold a special session to discuss the bill at 10 a.m. Monday. The House of Representatives is also expected to discuss a counterpart bill. The Philippine government has ramped up its response to the spread of the coronavirus disease 2019 by first placing Metro Manila under community quarantine and later on enhancing it to an enhanced community quarantine.
The first president that was granted emergency power was Manuel Quezon when the National Assembly allowed him to constitute a government in exile to maintain Philippine sovereignty. After the Japanese invaded during the Second World War in 1941, these emergency powers under Commonwealth Act No. 671 include transferring the seat of the government, reorganize the government of the Commonwealth and determine the order of the presidents of the heads of the executive departments, abolish departments and branches of government or create new ones, continue enforce the laws and appropriations that would have otherwise lapsed or become inoperative, impose new taxes or increase, reduce, suspend, or abolish existing ones, raising funds through the issuance of bonds and authorizing the expenditure of the proceeds, authorize the national and local governments to incur in overdrafts, declare the suspension of the collection of credits or payment of debts, exercise such other powers as he may deem necessary to enable the government to fulfill its responsibilities and maintain its authority. Quezon may be noted that he was governing under the 1935 Constitution, while Aquino, on the other hand, was the first president under the 1987 Constitution. Some of the powers granted to her under Republic Act No. 6826 were to protect people from hoarding, profiteering, injurious speculation, product deception, and other practices affecting the supply and distribution of food and essentials, purchase essential commodities, fix the prices and seize hoarded supplies, temporarily take over or direct the operations of any privately owned public utility or business, liberalize the importation and grant incentives for the manufacture and importation of vehicle or vessels, ensuring availability of credit, adopt a flexible working schedule for employees and workers in the government, conserving and regulating power, fuels, and energy, order the recovery and accounting of firearms, explosives, and equipment of law, ensuring the military uniforms and supplies were used and possessed only by authorized officers, decreasing the expenditures of the executive department and government-owned and controlled corporations, and lastly, undertaking such other measures as may be reasonable and necessary. With the expectation of the law enforcement and related powers, Duterte requested practically the same powers. More specifically, he wanted to direct the operations of any privately owned hospitals and health facilities, hotels and establishments to house health workers and quarantine patients, and public transportation to ferry frontliners. Here is the list of provisions unique to Duterte's administration's emergency powers proposal. First is adopting and implementing measures to prevent or minimize further transmission and spread of COVID-19, expedite the medical testing and observation of persons under investigation or monitoring for COVID-19, and the treatment of patients, ensuring that all local government units are acting in the line with the rules, regulations, and directive issues by the national government, procure goods and lease real properties, facilities, and critical services without the need for public bidding, and compliance with the Government Procurement Reform Act. Require businesses to prioritize and accept contracts for materials and service to promote government policy. Regulate the operation of transportation, road traffic and access, direct the cancellation of appropriated programs, projects, or activities of any agency of the executive department. Also, utilizing the ensuing savings, considering abandoning any unutilized or unreleased balance in special purpose funds, reprogram, reallocating, and realigning any appropriation in the General Appropriations Act for whatever purpose the President may deem necessary and desirable. Allocating cash funds and investments held by any government or controlled corporations or any national government agency for whatever purpose the President may deem necessary and desirable. Move statutory deadlines and timelines for filing and submission of any document and the payment of taxes and other charges required by the law. The effectivity of the bill is poised to be indefinite. It would be in full force and effect only for 2 months or longer if the calamity will persist, as may be determined by the President, although it may be withdrawn sooner by the means of concurring resolution of Congress or ended by presidential proclamation. But since Congress is dominated by Duterte allies, it should be noted, however, that Section 23 of the 1987 Constitution provides for a clear end for such powers on June 23, 2022. Unless sooner withdrawn by the resolution of the Congress, such powers shall cease upon the adjournment thereof. What does the Supreme Court said about emergency powers? The Supreme Court in the past frowned upon the unnecessary resort to emergency powers and stressed the need to avoid concentrating powers in the hand of one man. In its February 2, 1953 decision in the case of Rodriguez versus Gilia, the Supreme Court declared null and void the executive orders issued by President Manuel Rojas by invoking the emergency powers granted to Quezon. So the Supreme Court said emergency powers should not be used for such a long time, years after the war with Japan is over. It noted that the framers of Constitution had the vision and were carefully in allowing delegation of legislative power to the President for a limited period in times of war or other national emergency. Much as it is imperative in some cases to have prompt official action, deadlocks and slowness of democratic processes must be preferred to concentration of powers in any one man, or group of men for obvious reasons. It added, emergency in itself cannot and should not create power. In our democracy, the hope and survival of the nation lie in the wisdom and unselfish patriotism of all officials in their faithful and adherence to the Constitution.
Pursuant to Proclamation Number 933, dated March 21, 2020, by His Excellency President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, calling the Congress of the Philippines to a special session, the special session of the House of Representatives is hereby called to order. As we are in the middle of a national calamity due to a public health emergency, given the present situation, where means of transportation are limited and the majority of members are on official business attending to their respective constituents, for the purposes of exigency, with the attendance of 299 members, including those who are deemed present in accordance with Section 71 of our rules, specifically 279 members on official business, the Chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we direct the Secretary General to read the title and the text of Proclamation Number 933.
The Secretary General is directed to read the title and text of Proclamation Number 933.
Malacanang Palace, Manila, by the President of the Philippines. Proclamation Number 933, calling the Congress of the Philippines to a special session. Pursuant to the powers vested in me under Section 15, Article 6 of the Constitution, I, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, on March 23, 2020, or as soon as practicable, to authorize the President to exercise powers necessary to carry out urgent measures to meet the current national emergency relating to the coronavirus disease, COVID-19, to provide ample latitude to utilize appropriate funds to strengthen governmental response against the threat of the said disease, and to continue providing basic services to the people, in addition to the urgent and critical measures implemented pursuant to Proclamation Numbers 922 and 929, series of 2020, declaring a state of public health emergency and a state of calamity throughout the Philippines. In witness hereof, I hereby set my hand and cause the seal of the Republic of the Philippines to be affixed, done in the city of Manila this 21st day of March in the year of our Lord 2020, signed President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, by the President, signed Salvador C. Meldaldía, Executive Secretary.
And that ends our presentation for the emergency power of the Congress and how it is going to be applied in our nations, or what are the history of this emergency powers and how it can be granted in specific situations. Thank you so much, and you all have a great day.